In the ages-old quest to find the meaning in life, people have long turned to religion, spirituality, even the supernatural. But for non-believers, those are hardly satisfying paths to understanding. Dr. Ralph Lewis is a psychiatrist at the Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre in Toronto and a psycho-oncology consultant at the Odette Cancer Centre in the capital city as well. He's grappled with these hefty matters, and his new book offers some answers. It's called Finding Purpose in a Godless World: Why We Care Even If the Universe Doesn't. And it brings him to our studio for more. So nice to meet you. This is not small stuff, this book. You're into the heaviness of life, aren't you?
A pleasure to meet you, and thank you so much for having me here.
Well, not at all. Let's start with the very big question. Why do the majority of the people in this world apparently believe in some version of God or higher power?
We're purposeful, or if you like, purposive creatures, and we're intentional agents. We've evolved that way to be able to relate effectively to each other as social animals. We need to be able to read each other's intentions. And we also evolved in the Paleolithic environment to be able to infer the intentions of predators and prey. We're so good at reading or inferring intention that we overshoot on that. We think that things are intentional when they're not. We think that we see purpose where there isn't any. And we believe or assume that the universe has a purpose itself and is driven or designed by a higher purposeful agent.
A two-word follow-up. Even now, in spite of everything we know about science, in spite of everything, even now, we still believe this.
Yes, indeed, and not for unintelligent reasons either, because certainly we live in a world that is highly complex. It really does appear designed, and in fact, even a few high-level scientists believe that the laws of nature, the laws of physics, are fine-tuned to basically allow for us to have evolved here. So,
but you're not one of those people.
I'm not. I used to be, and so did a number of scientists. Who changed their minds on this. And so I would say that until the end of the 20th century, this was a really tough enigma. Why are the laws of nature, the laws of physics, so apparently fine-tuned to allow for life to evolve? And how could the incredible complexity of our world, especially our biological world, life, especially us, how could this possibly have arisen spontaneously and unguided? And furthermore, what about consciousness? How could this arise from material stuff, let alone spontaneously and unguided?
So many good questions there, including about your own personal journey along this route, which we'll come back to. I want you to start, though, by telling us or continue, I should say, about with a story about a patient of yours, a woman named Anna from Eastern Europe, and why her story is relevant in this context. So
Anna is an example, one of many. I see this all the time. Anna, and I should say that my case illustrations are, of course, altered, and some of them are composites to protect patients' anonymity.
Made up names and so on, for sure.
But basically, Anna was in her early 30s, an immigrant from a poor Eastern European country. She had fled that country because of abuse by her husband, who was a powerful man connected with the police. And she landed up in Canada, practically a refugee, safe here, but alone, away from her family, wondering why this had happened to her. And then she found the lump in her breast. And she landed up in my hospital, Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre in Toronto at the Odette Cancer Centre, and obtained state-of-the-art treatment for her breast cancer, and was incredibly relieved, becoming less pessimistic than she initially was, to realize that she was going to be okay. And that's when she had this aha moment. It all made sense to her. Everything happens for a reason. The whole arc of her life narrative had suddenly become clear. God had sent her husband to abuse her so that she would land up in Canada, so that she could get the life-saving treatment here.
There's only one problem with that story. None of that's true, right? I mean, can you say that to her?
Well, I never say such a thing to a patient. Right? I'm in the business of helping people to function better and to be less distressed. And only sometimes that involves helping them to see things more realistically from a scientific point of view.
So I just flunked the course, clearly. But you'll get us back on track here.
Well, so it's a very widespread human notion that everything happens for a reason and things are meant to be. And people think that not only cancer and abusive husbands happen for a reason. And by the way, she reasoned that God must have had a deeper, more mysterious reason for giving her cancer at all. But people think that the universe happened for a reason, and our whole lives happen for a reason. And people really, really struggle, Steve, to get their heads around the idea of randomness, the idea that randomness rules our lives, and that fundamentally there is no inherent purpose or reason for it all.
I'm going to get a little personal with you here, okay? But you talk about this in the book, so I think I'm on okay ground to do this. Your family had a similar circumstance to Anna's, right? Your wife discovered, is it, 10 years ago that she had breast cancer?
Yeah, actually, it's now more than 13 years ago, fortunately. But yes, exactly. And that, by the way, was why I got interested in doing cancer work some years later. So, I'd always been interested in the big philosophical questions, and my work certainly raises these questions every day. But it was my wife's cancer that brought it into sharp focus. So Karen was diagnosed with a very severe and aggressive form of breast cancer. It was not metastatic, but it was almost metastatic, but very fast-growing and dangerous at age 39. And we had 3 children, ages 7 and under. And at that time, I wasn't certain about the views that I'm now expounding on. I was partial to the idea that things happen for a reason, that there is some higher purpose, that the universe itself may be fine-tuned for us to have evolved, etc. I was never a literal biblical believer, but I was quite sentimental about religion in general.
Well, you came out of an Orthodox Jewish home, though, right?
Yes, a traditional, not highly religious, but traditional and a traditional Orthodox school for most of my primary and secondary schooling. And let me add as a footnote that I'm still sentimental about religion, and I still think that I think traditions have value, and I think that there are philosophical and psychological insights that religious people through the ages have come up with. And
You're not like Dawkins.
Well, I'm not in favor of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I understand and respect people's deep religious faith, and it's not just emotional, much of it is intellectual too.
But when your wife contracted that cancer, that
Yes.
awful kind of cancer,
So,
what did it do to all of the issues that you're writing about in the book?
well, it made me realize that I didn't have a fully coherent, substantiated worldview. There were contradictions in my worldview. I was certainly science-oriented, absolutely. But this belief that things happen for a reason, which was fueled by the eerie feeling in the early stage of her cancer that we were somehow being guided toward a favorable outcome. We were the beneficiaries of, as I said in the book, some extraordinarily serendipitous and fortuitous events in helping us to access the best diagnostic and treatment available at just the right time. And there were so many things that had they gone otherwise, she would not have survived.
So did you think there was a higher power at work?
in a vague and abstract way. I wasn't sure if I believed in a personal God or personal cosmic guidance. And I was suspicious of this eerie feeling because I didn't understand the theories that I explained earlier, but I did understand denial, psychological denial, and I knew in my work how rapidly and powerfully these get deployed when people's fates are being arbitrarily determined by trivial factors in an illness.
In those moments when you thought there might be some kind of higher power at work here, because we should say your wife, she beat it, right?
You're never out of the woods with cancer,
but so far
yes,
so good.
Yeah,
it's got a happy ending so far.
Yes.
Did the scientist in you argue with the other half of you, which was saying there must be some higher play at work here?
Absolutely, that's a good way of putting it. And what I realized in retrospect was that I was experiencing what we call cognitive dissonance, when a person holds two contradictory beliefs and it causes tension within them. So I started to become increasingly dubious and skeptical of my own beliefs. And this evoked for me these bigger philosophical questions that I'd always been interested in. Does the universe have a purpose? Is there a higher power? Is life and the universe just random? And so, being somewhat obsessive and intense, I really needed to come up with a more substantial, coherent set of answers. And this book is the product of that, of years of very intense research and reading and ultimately writing.
You've only asked some of the biggest questions in the history of the world that need to be asked that we'll never have answers for. But you've written what you think your answers are. How satisfied are you that you've kind of got a handle on this stuff?
Well, like everyone with a belief system, I'm very satisfied. Of course, I could be entirely wrong.
Indeed.
But
we'll never know.
Yeah, I find myself in very good company because what I have realized is that this is the scientific worldview. And I know there are people who would dispute that, but the scientists who I alluded to earlier, who believe in a purposeful universe, and scientists who are religious, are actually these days a minority. In fact, a small minority, especially when you look at the higher echelons of science, the most accomplished and knowledgeable scientists.
Now, in addition, you've got a title here that I haven't seen before, a psycho-oncology consultant.
Oh, yeah.
What is that exactly?
That just means I help people psychologically with cancer. And so many of those people are I say psychologically, but actually psychiatrically really as well. Many of these people are suffering from quite significant anxiety or depression. More than just distress or stress from cancer, but the kind of anxiety or depression that actually impairs a person's functioning, where that becomes the impairment of functioning sometimes even more than the cancer does. That's just one example of the kinds of patients I see.
Well, here's another one of those key questions. If you yourself, can't remember if you said in the book, you're more agnostic than atheist, I think you said in the book.
I was.
Was.
Yeah,
now you're quite atheist.
I'm comfortable with the
You're comfortable with that
atheist,
term.
Yes.
So if you can't really offer your dying of cancer patients everlasting life, what are you bringing to the dance exactly, Dr. Lewis?
Well, Steve, I think what I've realized that we all need more than anything is to know that we matter, that our lives matter, that it matters that we were born and that we have been here. And so in many ways, what I have to offer my patients is in the noble tradition of psychiatry and psychology, which is the therapeutic relationship itself. The demonstration to my patients that they matter to me. And I really do try to feel that and experience that and demonstrate that as best as I can.
Do you find that's enough for them?
Well, I also, of course, am trying to help people to realize, more importantly than mattering to me, I'm trying to help them realize how much they matter and have mattered to everyone else in their lives, and the impact that their lives have had on the little world around them. Most of us will hope only to make a modest impact on the people in our immediate world, our family, our friends, the people we work with. And what I have realized is that most people really underestimate the impact that they have on the people around them. It's one of the great tragedies of people who are suicidal is this distorted belief, and it's almost always distorted, severely so. The distorted belief that they don't matter and that everyone would be better off without them. Mm-hmm. And I hear people who are suicidal say, well, they, referring to family and friends, will be upset for a while, but they'll be better off in the end, unburdened by me. And it's a terrible distortion, a tragic one. So in my field, we work really hard to correct such distortions.
Let's, we've got a few minutes left here. Let's go to this. This is a quote from your book here that I'm going to read. To gain a more realistic picture of how the world really is, we need to bypass our subjectivity, our intuitions, our cognitive biases, our fears, and our wishful thinking. And I'm wondering whether that so-called realistic picture is only available, for example, to atheists who have a knack for the science and are not, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here? Are not burdened by religiosity or necessarily spirituality, that kind of thing.
Well, there are a few things to unpack in that question. First thing is, in terms of being unburdened, I think the one advantage that atheists have is they're liberated from the anguish of that question that people always ask, why me? What did I do to deserve this? Yes. Because if everything does happen for a reason, that's comforting, except when it's not, right? Because in really cruel cases of adversity, it's very, very hard to even begin to imagine what that more mysterious higher purpose might be. As many people are familiar with, Holocaust theology was often the ultimate example of that. But in our daily lives and on cancer wards, there are many examples of that. As for your point about intuition and subjectivity, so one of the things that science teaches, and is really hard to grasp, is, and actually it's a fundamental point in psychiatry, is don't believe everything you think. Do not trust your intuitions. We're, as a social species and as a storytelling species, as we're often described, we're so swayed by anecdote, so impressed by testimonial, so hugely impressed by subjective experience. But subjective experience is incredibly unreliable. And really, that's why you have to follow the data. And that is what science is about, is trying to neutralize and bypass subjectivity and intuition. The whole question of, does drug A cause effect B? And people will have a very hard time grasping this, which is why there's a multi-billion-dollar industry in alternative therapies that at best are placebos.
Indeed. After everything is said and done, can one live by reason alone?
Well, no, I don't think so. We're emotional or emotive beings. And to try to live by reason alone is practically to be autistic. But reason, we need to know the place of emotion and the place of reason. I'm still attached emotionally to religion. And by the way, I still observe many religious traditions without an iota of belief.
Yes.
It's cultural, and it's part of my roots and family tradition. But I need to to be fully aware that when it comes to really understanding why the world is the way it is, why we are here, how we came to be here, that is a question for science and reason and not emotion and subjectivity.
For some reason, your cognitive dissonance made perfect sense in this book, I have to tell you. Finding Purpose in a Godless World, Why We Care, Even If the Universe Doesn't. That's by Dr. Ralph Lewis, MD, from Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center. Thanks so much for being with us on TVO tonight.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.